Hello, my name is Im, and welcome back to my channel, and of course a welcome to all the new subs. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, and thank you for joining me on this journey through the final season of Shingeki. Perhaps, at some point you might get a chance to go back to my earlier reactions on the episodes. Now, before I get into the episode, if you are interested in full length, and the full length is timer based, or perhaps even early access to the next episode right now, consider checking out the Patreon page. Now, please remember that this is just optional, right? Regardless of that, Shingeki always goes up on Fridays. But this is an option for anyone who might be interested in more, right? Perks of supporting the channel or supporting the content, right? The option is there for you. And there's other things on my channel as well. Death Note is the other anime, if you're interested in that. And of course, there's a full list of anime I would love to get to at some point, and I hope to get to at least a couple of those, a few of those, a handful of those in 2021. And you can see the entire breakdown or the entire list on the homepage, the Patreon homepage. Anyone can see that. The list there are the ones I'm most interested in, right? Pretty much everything has been recommended at this point. There's a few that get recommended a lot, but if it's not on the list, it's because I just didn't find it didn't grab my attention, or it didn't hook me, and nothing about it hooked me, right? There's a few big ones that get recommended a lot that I'm not interested in. I know it might be disappointing to some, but there's so much anime to get through, so much incredible stuff to get through, and so little time. So I really do have to focus on the ones that really caught my attention. And as you can see in the lineup, there's some incredible anime listed there. So I hope to get to a lot of it, hopefully. So yeah, consider checking that out. Consider checking out the pinned comment. It has the links to the Patreon page, to social media, and if I need to make an update, I usually update the pinned comment. Right then, I think that's about it. So I hope you enjoy this. Oh, that's Reiner, isn't it? Jeez, he's half? Oh. My dude. Wow, he... right from the beginning, huh? Commander. Wow, he used to be small, huh? Yeah, it's the same hair. Undercut. Oh, come on now, man. He's a bit of a bully. Though he's a realist, I guess. Seek. Stand up, Reiner. Come on. He did end up making it. She just ignored it the moment she saw some trouble. Whoa. Smash that grasshopper. Wow, he really was the smallest. Bit of a runt. Oh, the contrast there though, right? At that age, they're out there training to be child soldiers. Whoa. Whoa. Damn. Forest of the giant trees, right? Oh, I love this. It's like the sleeper cell dossier. Yeah. Damn straight it does. Peak. The greatest ability of all, right? Oh. Is Armin ready for the God of Destruction? Oh my god. It's like nuclear testing going on. Even then he has a bit of concern, doesn't he? Whoa, look at this. A hero send-off. Oh, don't go in there, Reiner. Wow, the music, man. Oh my god, is it happening? This is it. It is. From the season 3 opening. Yeah. He really is like young Gabby, isn't he? Oh, he didn't want him to be one of the 9, did he? Just like Falco and Gabby. Yeah, he doesn't even get it. Oh, it's happening. That makes even more sense now. Him jumping in instantly to save him. Wow. Man, this kid's been up against it right from the beginning, huh? Whoa. Whoa. But still, it happens so quick though. Jeez. I mean, she's right about that. But damn, Annie. Back to her father. Whoa. Annie can be quite scary, man. Even at that age. Bertolt's just stand. Oh. Wow. Oh, he's gonna choke her out? Whoa, look at that. She didn't pay him any attention. Episode 2. Because he put you there. There they are. Wow, so Reiner made the choice for them, huh? He made the decision. Oh, that's the same story they told Armin and Eren. So they took this guy's story? Exact same shot, you know, opening. That was Kenny, wasn't it? And this is... No. Kenny is not your father, whoever you are. Precisely. Because of his sister. It is Annie, isn't it?
おいおい
Jeez, he's tall.
パパが嫌いになる年頃か
この上半身は晴天だ。
よってことにしとけ。お前ら
Marco.
起きろベルトルト。
私は王都のドブの中を這い回る。あいつがいたんじゃ。もう限界。
She ran into Kenny, huh?
ウォールローゼを破壊する。始祖の巨人をあぶり出す手段はもう他にない。
Eren has it at this point.
私は大勢死ぬね。
ずっと同じ夢を見るんだ。開拓地で首を吊ったおじさんの夢だ。
Wow. That's
なんで首をくくる前に僕たちにあんな話したんだろうって。
probably felt guilty, right?
エレン、少し休め。死んじまうぞ。
ライダー、どうやったらそうなれる？このままじゃ俺は何も果たせず。
He's just like Reiner.
ただやるべきことをやる。ただ進み続ける。それしかねえだろ。
Wow, keep moving.
そうだよな。
Who is that? My God. Wow.
俺にはまだあいつらが。
Wow, man, this episode.
経過は順調みたいですね。会話できるくらい回復して。
まあな。ここに心的外傷の治療に来てるもん。
That's Eren.
俺のは嘘だ。
That's him.
記憶障害で家まで帰れないってことにしてるが、本当は帰りたくないだけだ。
俺はそいつを戦士にさせたくなくて。
どうして？
Blush.
この候補生は女
Yeah. He cares for her. Bro, that's Eren sitting on the bench in Marley.
俺は力がないから何もできないまま。
Wow, there's a running theme here throughout the episode. Whoa.
自分自身も失う。
Hmm.
こんなことになるなんて知っていれば、誰も戦場なんか行かないだろ
How about you, Eren? Did you lose yourself?
う。みんな何かに背中を押されて地獄に足を突っ込むんだ。大抵その何かは自分の意志じゃない。他人の環境に強制されて仕方なくだ。ただし、自分で自分の背中を押したやつの見る地獄は別だ。その地獄の先にある何かを見ている。それは希望かもしれないし、さらなる地獄かもしれない。それは進み続けた者にしかわからない。
Whoa. Wow. This is insane. That last shot, though, and that line of dialogue, and that look in his face, right then, that is quite the episode. Quite the episode. I feel like I've been on a journey, and they managed to, turn it up to a different notch right at the end, by, establishing and confirming that it is Eren in Marley, this mysterious figure number 2. That brings a whole new dynamic, of course, and even before the confirmation right at the end, the definitive confirmation at this point that it is Eren on that bench, talking to Falco, and the fact that he's in Marley, that's just insane. I'll get into that, but throughout the episode, you see Eren pop up right in this backstory, in this flashback, and that is because him and Reiner are forever connected. Their lives are intertwined. The parallels are unmissable here, right? Eren and Reiner, eternal rivals, perhaps, but of course, it's more than that. But they are connected forever. And also, establishing Eren or showing Eren throughout the episode also kind of led to that finale of the episode, of showing us Eren or confirming that it is Eren at the end there. I mean, in terms of the pacing, it's quite a stark contrast to episode 2, right? Because episode 2 actually felt like a day in the life type pacing or setting. It wasn't really a bombastic pace. It really did take us through a day in their lives, right? In that sense, it almost even felt kind of like a slice of life take on it, and I love that. I really do love that. But then this episode really turned it up a notch, and I felt like it did a really good job of not having inconsequential or superfluous information in there. I feel like everything was handpicked, and certain things have to be noted because they are included in this episode that just covered so much. Now this episode covered a lot of ground. That's for damn sure. A lot of backstory, a lot of flashbacks, and it finally gave me something I've been asking for a long time. Right, the backstory of all of these characters. Right, Reiner, Bertolt, Annie, Marcel, Zeke, and just everyone. Right. Now in my mind, I kind of had it. I thought that maybe this kind of thing might be a mini arc on its own, a couple of episodes, 2-3 episodes. But it appears that it might have wrapped up in one episode because, it did kind of reach a natural conclusion, didn't it? And, on that end, that suicide attempt did not, I mean, that just shocked me. It certainly snuck up on me. I was just baffled. It was incredibly sad to see Reiner get to that point. The guilt, the insurmountable guilt he's being crushed under led him to that point. And of course, there's other parallels here to draw from. But yeah, that was jarring, man. It just snuck up on me. Though, they in these 2 episodes, they really did set up that concept, and they showed me that one Eldian soldier jump off the roof. Then they showed me the old man who told Reiner and Bertolt his story, right? The guy who hung himself. And then, of course, later, Reiner and Bertolt used that story as their own backstory, right? They told that story to Eren and Armin in season 1. But again, it's so much more than just that, isn't it? Even Bertolt, man. The primary focus, it was Reiner for sure, but I think the really effective thing about this episode is that they did bring in the rest as well, right? They were able to bring in the rest and give me enough on each one of them, actually. I feel like I have plenty to talk about as far as Annie goes. Before I go any further, just this question popped up. They trained those candidates, right? And of course, those candidates had Zeke and Peak in there, right? So the question becomes, how come Zeke wasn't chosen for this, right? Is there a possibility that they considered Zeke to be a bit too important to send on this, or too important to risk him on this mission? Even the commander showed concerns about sending children to, retake the founding titan. He thought it was quite absurd. He was baffled by this idea, right? I'm not sure if that's the exact terminology he used, but he had concerns about this, right? So again, he continues to be such an interesting character in that sense, that he's open about his thoughts, right? And he does question the military and their decisions. But yeah, this episode, man, wow. They were just kids. They didn't know anything, or they didn't know what they were doing. Again, goes back to Reiner, right? In season 2, episode 6. And then also, I'm remembering that moment from season 2, episode 11, Charge. Bertolt, somebody please find us, right? Somebody please come find us. And of course, that resonated with Ymir at that point in time, right? Because she was one of the only few that could understand their plea or his situation, and Reiner's situation. That shot of Ymir always stands out, of her really having this eye-opening or almost heart-to-heart moment as she's kind of like, staring down and listening to Bertolt's plea. And again, another thing that goes back to Reiner's breakdown in season 2, episode 6. If only I didn't know that people like this existed. I might not have turned into a half-assed piece of shit, right? And another standout thing in that episode is that he admitted that he doesn't even know if it's right or wrong anymore, right? But he kind of has to continue on that path, and face the consequences. And again, another parallel to something Eren said right at the end of this episode. The ending there. Oof, oh man, I'll get into that, but yeah. And again, this kind of connects to that dinner table scene in episode 2, right? Him almost reminiscing about the time he had there, right? And then, of course, the shocked reactions of his mother make even more sense now. She really is all about that indoctrination at this point in time, right? That's another thing that kind of came up in this episode, that there's different levels of, not all Eldians are in the exact same boat in terms of the thought process they have. Some just kind of go along with it, right, to stay alive, right, to stay out of trouble. But then there are some that truly believe this narrative that Marley has kind of put out there, right? And Reiner's mom is certainly one of them, and Reiner himself was one of them, right? And again, you are a product of your surroundings. And Reiner certainly, he believed in that, right? He did have this misplaced tendency towards this malign authority, right? This loyalty. But then you also get to see that at the same age, some of these other characters, some of these other kids know better, or know that there's more to it than just, the island devils being responsible for all of this. You see characters like Falco now in the present time, then you see characters like Marcel, you see characters like Annie, that are not so gung-ho about the whole, let's represent Marley. Let's become one of the 9, it'll be an honor to be one of the warriors. Some of them do get the bigger picture, and they understand that they cannot be open about their feelings, and they kind of just lay low, and they just want to survive, right? Unfortunately for Reiner, he was all in from a really early age, and that's one of the most tragic things about this, right? In fact, Reiner is perhaps the most tragic character of this entire series. He might just be. I think he is. And it's heartbreaking as a Reiner fan to see this, right? This episode, wow. This episode has changed so much about the series, right? And different key moments of the series, a different perspective of key moments from the series. That initial attack from episode 1 on that day, the meaning of that attack and the perspective has completely changed forever, right? Once you watch this episode, you simply cannot have that same take on that first episode, right? Because of that traumatic experience, lives are changed forever on both sides, right? Now they show us this other side, these child soldiers having to do something that insane, that immense, to have such an insurmountable burden on their tiny shoulders. It is insane, all right? And then speaking of getting a look at it from their sides, they're again, that shot of Reiner in episode 2, showing up as the camera pans up. Yeah, it's an iconic shot at this point. It pans up. After all this time later, it changed the perspective on that as well. They show us his thoughts at that moment in time. He's so confused. They show a young Reiner inside the armored titan as he's getting ready to smash through that gate. But, at that point in time, he's actually so confused about everything that's going on, right? He's got 1,000 thoughts in his mind. Again, an immense amount of guilt on his shoulders at that point in time, or on his mind. And he still has no understanding of anything that's going on at this point, right? And he didn't even understand at that point the reason Marcel could possibly save someone like him, right? Again, they were just kids. And, I'm saying it changes the perspective forever, but as as if you've been here for a few years and my take on, Reiner, Bertolt, and Annie, I've I've always maintained, I know it's going to sound like a broken record, but I've always maintained that I need to see their side of the story. I need to see their backstory. Everyone has their own struggles, and this episode just perfectly depicts that, right? I questioned this earlier on, I think, in season 1, maybe even season 2, that imagine, young children, same age as Eren, Armin, and Mikasa, having to do that, right? It really is quite sad, isn't it? This episode really does change so much. It gives you a different perspective on things, right? And in that sense, this is one of Isayama-san's strong points, right? That, the use of backstory. He's a master at it. He just is. He knows exactly how to. He knows the perfect moments for it. He knows the perfect time to bring it in. And I've been saying it for some time now, because of some of these backstory episodes or some of these flashbacks. But, powerful revelations can come from the use of backstory, right? Previous significant events in the lives of these characters, right? Revealed at a critical moment to create turning points, right? And really provide a different perspective to things, right? And change the perspective on a certain situation forever. And I hope in the near future I can actually go back to the beginning of the series, right, and experience it all over again, because again, once you have all these different perspectives, things change. Something almost inconsequential could have a totally different meaning, right, once you go back to it and see it from a different perspective, one that the writer Isayama-san has provided now through the use of backstory. And as you guys know, I'm a big fan of flashbacks and backstory, because a lot of the perspective and a lot of the context comes from that, right? Especially in a story like this. So much is shrouded in mystery, right? At this point in time, not as much as it used to be, right? In seasons 1, 2, and even the first half of season 3. But yeah, a lot of it comes from the backstory and the use of flashbacks, right? The context, that is. And I feel like it's going to continue on that path, right? There's still so much that needs to come from backstory, so much context that needs to come from backstory, and perspective that needs to come from the backstory, right? But I feel like I have to begin with the ending. Eren Yeager is in Marley, right? He's in Liberio. This is insane. It's just, there's so many different tangents to take from this. First of all, yes, official confirmation that it is Eren. I think at this point in time, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's Eren. There's a couple of things that are included here to really communicate with the audience that this is Eren. This is Eren. So yeah, I was on that path in episode 2. I did feel like this is Eren, but I wasn't as sure as Jean from episode 1's ending. But yeah, I think one of the major scenes that led me to that down that path is, of course, that shot of him watching Reiner. And again, knowing that it is Eren, that shot is even more ominous now, right? I did say that it felt like an ominous figure looming above Reiner. Again, the framing of the shot made it seem like that as well. And yeah, now that you know for sure that it's Eren, that shot is quite interesting, isn't it? Because even that shot itself confirms a few things, It confirms that Eren, he knows that Reiner is around. Of course he knows Reiner's around, and he's seen Falco with Reiner, right? So there's that constant, that connection, right? Because Falco is clearly there, right, alongside Reiner and the fellow candidates, and now he's also speaking with Eren. So there's a bit of a connection here now, a middleman almost. So in that sense, is it even possible that Eren is, he's realized this and he is kind of latching onto Falco for that reason? Though the conversation he's having with Falco certainly felt like a heart-to-heart, didn't it? Perhaps an experienced older individual, Eren, who certainly feels like he's learned quite a bit in these last few years, right? Or he's come to understand quite a bit. Is kind of giving this young person that he thinks is quite a nice person, a good person, some much needed life advice almost, right? Now, before I move any further on that, in terms of him infiltrating Marley, this is mysterious individual number 2, right? So now I know for a fact that at least 2 scout members are here, right? And I still believe that the rest of them must be here. They're doing their own thing. Everyone's kind of separated, right? And blended in. And of course, Eren's cover is this injured Eldian soldier, right? Who has this mental trauma. At least that's the story he's presenting, right? Though of course he was quite open with Falco, right? He told him, no, I'm just kind of pretending. That's not real. I made that story up. Though, on that note, the conversation or the things he said to Falco in relation to that, I feel like you could get some insight from that, in terms of how things played out these past few years and Eren's thought process, and a few potential things that might have gone on. But of course, the moment he starts speaking, there it is, right? That's a definitive confirmation. That is Eren. It's unmissable, right? And it should be noted that the voice is the same tone I heard in season 3 finale, right? Him on the beach, that detached, tired, hollow voice, right? Now, the line of dialogue that is quite interesting here, and really could be read into, is of Eren telling Falco that he doesn't want to go home because at this moment in time, it would be tough for him to face his family, right? Now, of course, home is Paradis, right? And family is Armin, Mikasa, and the Levi squad, right? The scouts, at least that, tight-knit group. But of course, beyond that, he does have actual family, actually pretty close by, doesn't he? Reiner, sorry, not Reiner, Zeke, right? His half-brother, and then of course his grandparents. They're actually really close by. So, even that presents a really unique and interesting dynamic here, or possibility here, that his actual family, blood relatives, are nearby. So, let's keep an eye out on that. But, say he's speaking of his, other family, the family he's known all this time on Paradis. What's happened in this time skip that makes it so he doesn't want to go home at this moment in time, because he doesn't feel like he could face them at this moment in time. What's happened in these past few years? First train of thought is disagreements, right? Perhaps they're not on the same page, right? That's the first thought that comes to mind, and that he's not able to face them right now. Now, I know that there is another scout here, Jean, and I am assuming that the rest are here as well. It's just spread apart perhaps. But that line of dialogue really does make it seem like they might not be on the same page as Eren, and that it is possible he might be doing his own thing here, right? Again, it's going to come up throughout the episode that a lot can happen in those 3-4 years, right? Before I go any further, how the hell did they even get here, right? That's the question now. They did show me Eren in episode 2, right? In that Mid-East area, before they got on the train to Liberio. Again, the question remains, did Eren board the train from that point, or was he part of the Eldian army even before then, right? And then you have to look at Jean. He's the other one that's confirmed, so I'm just gonna stick on Jean, even though I do think the rest are here. They must be here. Infiltrated sleeper agents. You know how much I love that. But how the hell does Jean get here, right? In episode 2, the commander mentioned that all these scout ships they sent, right? 32, I believe. None of them came back, right? So, of course, they stopped those ships from coming back. But that also means that if nothing came back, no one's taking that path towards Marley, right? So, of course, they got here through another path. But that's the interesting concept here, right? Or the interesting question here. How did they manage to get here, right? If they're not using that path. Now, setting aside, the what-if situations, they've established that Marley certainly has their share of enemies, right? So is there even a possibility here of or of a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? Is anyone out there open to strategic partnerships with Eldians or Paradis in that case? That's a tricky bit, right? Because they've established that the rest of the world hates the Eldians, right? Or the Eldian Empire in their dark history. So, you know, now you have to question, could things have changed that much in the last few years that there might be other nations or there might be other groups of people, perhaps important people, that did, end up going into that partnership. So yeah, that's a tricky bit, right? Have things changed enough in these past few years that maybe even Paradis could team up or form an alliance, right? With someone who might consider Marley an enemy, right? Again, a beneficial partnership, perhaps. You know, they showed me that there's this Mid-East alliance, right? So it's not just one area; it's an alliance that was against the Marley nation in episode 1. So let's see how that plays out, because they certainly needed some other path to get through, right, and infiltrate. All of that being said, it's possible they might have done it on their own. Now, going back to Eren, it's so clear to see that he has an understanding of the situation, that he has an understanding for the struggles on this side as well, right? And it's clear to see that he's empathetic towards the Eldians on this side as well, knowing their struggles and, experiencing their struggles on an everyday basis, right? That was one of the points I brought up. Now that they are here, they do get a firsthand look at how the Eldians are treated here and just their own struggle. So he gets it, right? He has a clear understanding of that. And he said some really interesting things to Falco, right? That can apply to Eldians as a whole, the Eldians and Marley, and of course it applies to the focus of this episode as well, Reiner. He brings up this concept of most of them being pushed by something, right? Being forced to experience hell, as depicted in episode 1, right? And then, of course, that poignant, heartbreaking scene of the return of the soldiers to their families, the reunion in episode 2. That, their situation, or, someone else made them do it. The choice isn't there. That these things had to be done out of necessity, right? He understands. He completely understands that. And, and on that note, he understands Reiner, Bertolt, and Annie's reasoning, right? The reason they had to do that all that time ago, right? It's clear that he has an understanding of this now. And he didn't seem vindictive, did he? He accepted it, right? He has a clear understanding of the struggle. And, in that sense, Eren is actually the only person that Reiner could even possibly openly talk to, right, about his situation. And then again, that's the crazy thing. They're not really that far apart, they're barely separated here. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that it could even end up happening, especially given the fact that Falco seems to be this middleman, right? And kind of like the constant that's connecting Reiner to Eren almost. And he doesn't even know this yet, of course. Much like he didn't know that he just ended up saving Reiner's life, right? He played a major part in that. Eren is the only one in Liberio who can actually understand his struggle, right? Who can actually, who Reiner can actually openly speak with about all of this stuff. And you see this in episode 2, Reiner having to tippy-toe, Reiner having to hold his real feelings in, right, and put on this facade of this loyal warrior, right. And now it's certainly a facade, a mask he has to put on, but back around the time he was in his candidate days, it wasn't a facade. He was quite dead set on that philosophy, right? Again, the indoctrination of these children was quite effective, at least on some children, that's for sure. Reiner being one of them, and then now you have Gabby, and Reiner sees himself in Gabby, and he knows how this ends, right? He knows the path she's on, and of course he's actively trying to get her away from that path, right? And he is trying to do a few different things to make that happen. One being the fact that he openly asked Falco that it has to be you have to save her from the dark future, right? But in that sense, I'll get into Falco's disposition as well. Falco is open to that idea regardless of Reiner bringing it up or not. Falco has his own reasons for wanting to be the armored titan, right? Mainly because he wants to protect Gabby, because he has feelings for her, he cares for her, he doesn't want to see her enter this life of hell, this limited life as well. That much is clear, and Reiner kind of had to take an aggressive approach and scare him into making sure that he doesn't voice those opinions out loud like that around the wrong person, right? So in that sense, it was really interesting to see him taking that approach. Now, Falco thought he was being, quite real about this, right? Quite serious about this. But of course, it was just an approach he had to take, this aggressive approach to kind of scare him into being more careful about this. And then, you see young Reiner using that same approach, and he truly believed in that approach back then, right? Questioning Galliard's loyalty, that he might even be this stray restorationist, right? Another thing I've been talking about, or a concept I've been talking about in some of these Shingeki discussions, is the notion that characters have a certain sense of morality and a certain philosophy, right? But at a critical moment, or at some moment, they do feel the need to divert from that, right? An internal contradiction, sorry. And you see that internal contradiction depicted in this episode, right? Throughout these flashbacks and the backstory of Reiner Braun. And again, it was clear to see in episode 2 that this is not the same person that left Liberio as the armored titan, right? This is not the same kid. And that was clear to see in episode 2. And now you really get to see that struggle magnified in this episode, right? It leads him to quite a tragic decision at the end, and he was ready to do it, right? If Falco didn't bang on that wall, Reiner was ready to end it, right? And of course, that's one of the saddest things I've seen in this entire series. It was so jarring. It caught me so off guard. It really was heartbreaking to see that sight, of that rifle, the barrel of that rifle in his mouth. See, again, that goes back to that insurmountable mountain of guilt that he's being crushed under constantly, right? And he can't even talk to anyone about it, right? And in that sense, that story about the old man, or he wasn't that old, but the older man who told him about running from the Titans that showed up at that cabin, right? And leaving those children behind. You could tell that he was holding that guilt in, and he just wanted to tell someone about it, right? And all this time later, Reiner clearly understands that man's position, right? And the guilt that was kind of just killing him, right? So Reiner certainly at this point, he understood something that he didn't understand back then. Bertolt was also another one that was haunted by that man's story, and he so much so that he was having nightmares about this. And a scene that was previously established, or a thing that was previously established as something comedic, his sleeping positions, right? Up until this point, they are established as something comedic, right? A character quirk. But this episode turned it into something quite dark, right? It shed some light on it, right? Context, perspective. It appears that he was having these nightmares, and these positions might be mimicking things he's dreaming about. But I say that because this episode is so jam-packed, but they still made it a point to focus on that one scene of him sleeping, right? In an episode like this, one that has so much story and so much different areas to cover, nothing is random, right? So that shot in there is clearly contextualizing a different side to all of it, right? And you see that he's got his hands behind his back in one of those positions, or the position they do show me. And then, of course, there's a tight shot of Bertolt's face, you know. So yeah, you know, again, perspective, context through these through the things presented in these backstories, right? So more of that in a bit. You know, there's still quite a bit to cover for Reiner, but you know, I have to circle back to Eren, because this scene is quite crucial, I think, in terms of, you know, hinting at some of the things that have gone on in these past few years, and perhaps even showing us the path Eren might be headed to, or on, right? And in that sense, this final line of dialogue, right? Another line of dialogue that, you know, immediately connects him to Reiner, because he kind of repeated or reiterated something Reiner told him all that time ago. Again, you know, goes back to that notion of them being forever connected, right? Their lives being intertwined, no matter how this plays out, you know, regardless of them ever seeing eye to eye, or, you know, ever being on the same side. You know, I can't see that happening. I can't see these two characters ever being on the same side again, but there's something beyond that. They are connected, right? And I'm not talking about like the whole, you know, Eldians being connected. I'm talking about Reiner and Eren specifically, you know, being connected through their experiences and the unmissable parallels, right? But this final line of dialogue right at the conclusion of the episode, this is the intriguing bit, right? This is the definitive bit. You know, he said that it might actually be another hell, or it might be hope, but only those who keep moving forward are ever going to know, or ever going to find out. And that paired with that look in his face, right? Or the look in his face paired with that line of dialogue. Yeah, as you saw in my reaction, that is quite expressive, isn't it? In terms of actually, before I even go into that, you know, again, that serves a few different purposes, right? Showing us a clear, tight shot of his face, of course. For starters, that is Eren. If you missed the voice, this should, you know, this should make it quite clear that this is Eren. So that's for the audience. For starters, that's for the audience to see that this is Eren, right? Showing his eye is important as well, right? Because of course, he's got those distinct eyes, right? As Keith Shotter said, those fangs lurking deep within your eyes are certainly those of your father, right? And they show that tight shot of him. Now, the look in his face, that is not a depiction of someone who has doubts, right? That is quite a definitive look. That is quite a stern look. That is quite a almost confident look. It is a confident look, right? Confident in the sense that it depicts that he is in control of the situation, and he knows the path he has to take, or he knows that in his mind, right? He's not undecided about things. That's what I'm getting from this shot and that line of dialogue, right? This is someone who has a plan of action, I think. I think it is clear to see that Eren knows what he has to do, and he essentially said as much, right? It might be hope, or it might be another hell, but I have to keep moving forward to find out. Essentially confirming that, you know, this plan of action he has, and he certainly has one, he plans on going through with it, because they established that he understands the struggle here, right? He's experienced it, he's seen it, he's living through it, and he doesn't even seem vindictive about it at all, right? He understands Reiner, Annie, and Bertoltz, and I guess Reiner specifically in this case. He understands their reasons, right? Yet he also understands that he has to continue on this path he's on, right? And then that takes you back to the season 3 finale, right? On the beach. He knew what has to be done here, but he wasn't entirely sure if it's a guarantee to freedom, right? It was quite a haunting moment, right? Him pointing across the sea and saying that, you know, if all our enemies are defeated on that side of the sea, are we going to be free, right? So he doesn't actually know if this is the right path, but he knows it's a path he has to take, right? Again, that goes into the whole concept of the attack titan, Shingeki no Kyojin, always moving forward, right, towards freedom. So yeah, that look you know, a picture can paint 1,000 words. That's for damn sure. And, you know, they even made it easier for us by, you know, pairing it up with that line of dialogue. And then, you know, a really scary, not scary, but interesting, intriguing prospect here is one that was set up in the last episode. It was established. It was so clearly established that something big is on the horizon, right? You know, Zeke, this is in that room, Zeke's room, right? As he's explaining to the rest of the unit, you know, the big plan on the horizon and the big festival on the horizon, right? This is like this big move that's being put into place, right? And this Tiber family is being brought in for this, right? To make this announcement. And that there's going to be a festival, and a lot of important people from abroad are going to be here. But the thing I found bizarre or so strange is the fact that they're holding this festival inside Liberio. That is just bizarre. It is. You know, and they're going to have all these important people. They're going to have this Tiber family, but it's going to be inside Liberio. And who did they just confirm is at Liberio or inside Liberio? Eren Yeager. Coincidence? I don't know, man. This is getting quite spicy. This is getting quite enticing, intriguing. That's for damn sure. Again, I really do find it so strange that they're holding this big festival of important people and the Tiber family coming out. Apparently, they don't really come out of their mansions much, but now they're being called in for this big moment, right? And you know, Zeke said this plan is crucial to the future of Marley and Eldians, right? So again, big moment. Something big is on the horizon, and Eren Yeager is right there. Right place at the right time, isn't he? Now, like I mentioned, you know, there's different types of Eldians, and they have different approaches to this. You know, all of them just want to survive, but some of them are a bit more cognizant to their situation than others, right? Of course, Reiner, he was all in from an early age. I mean, this is all he's known all his life, right? That's one of the most tragic things about this. He was up against it right from the beginning. And unfortunately, even his mother kind of helped shape that for him, right? Now, you know, I'm not blaming his mother for kind of setting him on that path, but at that age, you know, you see your mother so upset and laying out the reason that her husband and his father could not be here is because they are different, because they're Eldians. You know, at that age, at such a tender age, a susceptible age, he, you know, innocent young Reiner thought that, you know, maybe if I succeed as a candidate, and, you know, if my mother gets to be an honorary Marleyan as well, then maybe I can rejoin our family, right? He was just this innocent young boy, right, who just couldn't bear to see his mother upset like that, and he just wanted to make her happy, right? So, you know, his initial reason for even wanting to be this warrior, you know, for wanting to be a Marleyan, that was the reason. That's the thing that kicked it all off, right? Circling back to my original point, you know, different people having different understanding of the situation. You know, there's this concept of trying to protect family from this fate, right? This dark fate, you know, the curse of Ymir. They don't call it that, but, you know, it's a curse nonetheless. The Marley nation or the regime has certainly established this as a great honor, right? Taking on one of these titans, one of the nine, and becoming a warrior on their behalf. You know, it's the greatest honor, right? They even had this whole like send off, a hero send off, right? But there, you know, of course, a lot of that crowd is treating it as a hero send-off, but there's a lot of Eldians in there that are probably quite sad at that sight, right? Knowing that, okay, these young kids are made to think, or some of these Eldians, even their fellow Eldians, are buying into this, right? That, you know, this is the path to prove that they are different from their, devil blood ancestors, right? And they are different from the devils on Paradis. But in that sense, you also have people like Marcel, who's sitting right there in the buggy, and people like Annie, who know, even at that age, that this is all bullshit, right? Annie, in particular, wow, she doesn't give a shit about any of that, right? Marlene's, Eldian's, she really had a clear understanding of this. That it's all for show, right? And it's all to keep people in line and give them the perception that they are doing something incredible for their family. I mean, there is, that notion of getting the red armband. Of course, that has some significance for sure in that community. But in the grand scheme of things, Annie was kind of spot on, right? As she's beating Reiner to a pulp. More on that later. But there are, people of that age that do know that this is not the path to be on, right? And in that sense, one of the bigger mysteries of this story now is the fact that Annie did end up becoming a warrior, and she did take on the female Titan, because she seems one of the most out of place out of all of them, right? She doesn't, like I said, she thinks it's all bullshit. This also kind of goes back into that concept of her father apologizing to her in season 1, right? In those flashbacks, as she's falling, right? From the walls as Mikasa cut her fingers. So that is also an exciting prospect, getting Annie's backstory, right? And the reason she ended up part of the unit, right? It doesn't feel like it was by choice. It's really starting to feel like it wasn't her choice alone. And I believe I did bring that up in some of my season 1 discussions, right? That it did feel like perhaps she didn't make the choice to be in this position. So let's see how that plays out. And of course, that makes her father another interesting character, right? Or someone interesting to know more about. And, I'll go into it in a bit. I have a section just for Annie. But yeah, she's certainly one of the more exciting prospects of the series at this point, the story. Through her reintroduction at some point, and surely she is going to get reintroduced back to the story at some point, especially given that this is now the final season. Let's see how that plays out, but I'll get to that in my Annie section. But going back to the concept of saving your family from this fate of being one of the 9, becoming a warrior, essentially becoming a weapon of mass destruction, right? And having a short lifespan, right? A death sentence, essentially. He successfully, saved Galliard from that. Though in the long run, Galliard still ended up being the Jaw after taking it from Ymir. And you can see how apologetic Marcel was about this, right? He was apologizing even before they left for the mission, right? And this is one of the things that Reiner just couldn't comprehend, right? He didn't quite understand the nature of things at that point in time. But of course, after some life-altering moments and experiences, he understood, right? And now he's trying to do the same thing for Gabby, who seems to be on the exact same path Reiner was on, right? It really is a Reiner. And now he's trying to do something Marcel did all that time ago. And again, that was another heartbreaking thing that, young Reiner just didn't understand the reason Marcel keeps apologizing and the reason he's so upset about this, right? Around the campfire, he just didn't understand it at that moment in time. He certainly understands now. He understands a lot of things now. Again, he's not the same person that left Liberio all that time ago. And of course, then there's Falco as well, who doesn't want Gabby to take this, and he tells Eren as much, and he tells him, even though he wants this, he wants to do this, he wants to become the armored, so Gabby doesn't have to suffer in the long run. He's powerless to do anything about it, right? That's another running theme throughout this episode, wanting to make a change so badly, but then the frustrating nature of not having the capacity to do it, right? You see that depicted in this episode, through Reiner, through Eren, through Falco. And going back to that suicide attempt, Falco was responsible for stopping that, right? Even though he doesn't know it, he was the reason Reiner stopped it, or gave up on that at that moment in time, because that was a reminder that he does have something to live for, that he perhaps has a responsibility still, that not all is lost. the door of hope in that sense, right? The title of the episode. And, there's that one shot of him looking out the barred window, right? That shot really does encapsulate his current state, right? Just how trapped he feels. It was quite a poignant shot, wasn't it? It was a visual representation of his current state. But through that tiny opening, he does see some hope, a reason to live on, right? A responsibility, perhaps. Right, Falco, seeing Falco like that reminded him of the other candidates, and in this sense, family member Gabby, right? So he has to live on. There is hope. There is a reason to live. One of the things that's clear to see here is the focus on mental health, PTSD, the horrors of war on both sides. It's not glorifying war at all. It's certainly not. And I feel like Isayama-san should get a lot of, and I hope he's getting a lot of credit for this. He is raising awareness to a large segment, right? Shingeki really is one of the most popular series, right? Well, it's a cultural phenomenon at this point. Really showing the side of it, right? To a large audience that is made up of all kinds of demographics, right? So yeah, I really do like that focus on PTSD and mental health, right? And again, the really, in episode 2, and then, in the conclusion of this episode, they show us Eldian soldiers going through this, or, struggling with these problems. But then, again, this episode, the main focus of this episode is Reiner. He's a long established character of the show, and he is having a tremendous amount of problems with all of these things, right? Handling these problems, PTSD, mental health, insurmountable guilt. Like I said, it really was quite tough to watch this as a Reiner fan. Everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong for this kid. Right from the beginning of his life. I'm so used to seeing, or the audience is so used to seeing Reiner as this imposing force, this big lad, right? Strong person, mentally and physically, right? Someone that was established as a role model, right? As this big brother figure for so many of the 1/4 members, including Eren Yeager, who really did look up to him, right? It broke his heart. It absolutely broke his heart to see or find out that it was Reiner and Bertolt. But Reiner in this case, that was the armored titan, this traitor, right? So that was one of the biggest moments of the series. Eren having that part of his life shattered in that moment, right? That this person he's looked up to so much ended up being someone he has to hate now. And then you get to see young Reiner, and it's not the same person, is it? You see this runt of the litter. He's quite small, smallest one of the group in terms of the males, at least. Actually, he might be even smaller than Peak and Annie, right? They really made it a point to show us just how he stuck out like a sore thumb, right? He's the runt of the litter. There's even that one shot of Bertolt and Reiner running by, right, they're on a jog, and then you see the bottom of the frame. You see Bertolt's shoulders and head, and you see just the top of Reiner's head, right, his blonde hair. I thought that was such an effective shot, again, to depict just how small he really is, right? In that sense, you get that Captain America and Bucky feeling from this, right, before Cap ends up becoming this specimen. But not only that, he just wasn't exceptional in anything, right? Unfortunately, he just wasn't. No matter how hard he tried, he still stuck out as bottom of the totem pole. He was at the bottom of the ladder. The one thing he did have is tenacity, commitment, right? And again, a parallel to Eren, who also had those struggles in those training episodes, right? The 1/4 days, and of course, you see those moments of Reiner seeing himself in Eren in the struggles, right? And helping Eren up and looking after Eren. He also looked after Armin, right? There's a shot of young Reiner running through the rain, runt little Reiner running through the rain. And then there's a similar shot of Armin running through the rain in season 1. And then Reiner sees himself again, right? He sees himself right then and there. And he decides to just take his backpack to help him, right? Listen, it's clear to see that Reiner is a good person. He's just this innocent boy who's just a product of his surroundings, man. And again, he had such a right from the beginning, he was up against it, right? He's had a miserable life, you know. His trajectory has been, I don't, you know, like Bertolt said, you know, in episode 11, season 2, episode 11, the only time they had any break from that guilt, that constant guilt, that insurmountable guilt, is around the time they got to pretend to be soldiers, right, in the 104th. And like I said, the one thing Reiner did have on his side is commitment, tenacity, right? He did have that. And again, that's similar to Eren, right? Eren's always had this incredible sense of purpose, right? But the difference here is that Eren almost kind of felt like he was destined for that. Reiner had it tough, man. And in that sense, you know, if you compare the two, Eren actually had quite a nice childhood, right? An upbringing. He had the love of his family, both parents. He even had a sibling figure in Mikasa. His upbringing, it wasn't problematic, right? It was a decent upbringing until that day, of course. But again, now you compare that to Reiner. I keep saying it, but he was up against it from such an early age, right? He's got this ghost, another ghost of this character arc is introduced in this missing father figure that he tried his best to reunite with his mother, right, to put his family back together. But of course, that is around the time young Reiner is still learning the harsh reality, or getting harsh reality checks about the world, the cruel world he's born into, right? He's about to, you know, depart, and perhaps he's experiencing one of the best moments of his life, right? In his terrible life up until that point, and it all comes crashing down before he can even depart, right? This man is he doesn't want to associate with these Eldians, and in that sense, you kind of have to ask the question: how did this end up even happening? And you have to feel bad for Reiner's mom, right? Because it feels like even she was kind of bamboozled or lied to, right? Listen, man, men can be terrible. They could do some terrible things. It appears that, you know, he kind of roped her into this one-time thing, right? And it resulted in Reiner. So yeah, you know, it appears that even she was kind of lied to, and she's even out here believing that, you know, maybe if she was Marlene, this could have actually happened, right? Being together. But it was never going to happen, right? He used her, clearly, this man. Now, if you look at Reiner's trajectory, it is tragic, man. You know, he goes from this sweet, young, innocent kid who just wants to see his mother happy, right? You see your mother upset like that, you just want them to be happy, right? Then, you know, he's in this candidate training, and it's quite clear to him and everyone else that he sticks out like a sore thumb, right? He goes through this rigorous training, struggles through it. He's taunted for being inadequate, for his shortcomings, right? Galliard certainly made sure to remind him. And again, you know, this goes into the whole, you know, them having history. They have quite a bit of history. And Galliard actually sees a lot of these experiences through Ymir's memories, right? Then having some semblance of happiness, you know, thinking that he was picked as Armor Titan on merit, right? Happiest day of his life, perhaps, and his mother's life as well. But then on the day of that departure of this monumental mission that you think you've earned on merit, he gets rejected by his biological father, who is just petrified at the idea of even being close to him, right? So he's got that on his mind as he's departing, right? So he certainly departs under a dark cloud, but then he at least still has the notion that he was picked on merit to be one of the four heroes who is going to, you know, save the world from the Eldian devils, the island devils. And then that comes crashing down. Though he wasn't able to realize that at the moment, it does come crashing down because the leader of the group, Marcel, tells him that he wasn't even meant to be here, right? He wasn't picked on merit. So now that's taken away from him, right? Imagine your sense of self at that moment in time, rock bottom, right? Beyond, you know, below rock bottom. And then after that, right, that same leader dies for you, dies protecting you because he feels the guilt of putting you in this position, putting this 13-year curse on you. So he also had this insurmountable guilt that made him jump right into action the moment he saw Reiner in danger, like his life in danger. So now he has that on his mind, right? then there's the guilt of running from that situation, right? Once again being reminded of his shortcomings by Annie, making that decision to stick around and not go back to Marley. That haunts him as well. That is one of the main reasons for this immense amount of guilt and shame he carries around, right? Then slowly finding out the island devils are not actually devils at all. Again, depicted in that dinner table scene in episode 2. He's almost reminiscing about those times, almost missing those moments with people he actually could have called friends or considered friends or comrades. Essentially, the choice to stay there. He made that choice, right? He made the decision, the executive decision to stay there, right? Annie, she wanted to go back home, and Bertolt looked like he was ready for that as well. Ultimately making that decision to stick around, right, after choking out Annie, and essentially making that big call, massive call, it essentially lost him everything, and it just piled on that guilt. Again, a mountain of guilt, right? Because he ended up losing everything because of that decision, right? They lost Annie, right? She's lost to the people at Paradis, or she's lost in Paradis. He lost perhaps his best friend, right? He had a near-death experience himself, but he also had that tremendous guilt of knowing that the reason Bertolt died is because I made that decision to stay here all that time ago. So he also kind of sealed Bertolt's fate as well on that day, right? On that day he decided to stay here and continue the mission. He was the only one who came back from that mission all that time ago, right? One of the 4 that survived and came back. And there's this sense, I brought this up in season 3 part 2, at this point in time he might have been better off just dead, right? He might have felt that I'm just better off dead, yet he keeps surviving these near-death experiences, right? And again, those near-death experiences are playing a part in this PTSD he's experiencing at the moment as well. But in the end, that decision ended up costing him everything, right? But he did arrive at that decision, right? He did take that initiative, made that decision. And the near-death experience of Annie, young Annie just stomping him, giving him a brutal beatdown, perhaps that could have been a physical depiction of the death of the old Reiner, right? He said as much, Reiner is dead. I'll be Marcel if you need Marcel, I'll take that leadership position. So he certainly took that initiative, right? And he apologized to them in that room once Annie came to. He apologized for making that choice for them, but he also promised them that he'll be the warrior that he should have been. Also through this, he kind of had a new chance at life, didn't he? He had a chance to reestablish himself with a totally new group of people, right? And now it's a stark contrast from his existence in the Barrio and a candidate, the runt of the litter, the least impressive of the bunch, to now establishing himself as this really impressive figure, right? This role model. Someone who's admired by many, including Eren Yeager. Someone that can be trusted, right? Someone that people can look up to, right? He had a chance to establish himself as that figure, right? And in that sense, he might have had some of the best years of his life on Paradis, right? He essentially grew up in Paradis, right? He came in as a child, Reiner that is, Bertolt as well, and Annie. But, Reiner more so than the other 2, he really grew up there, right? The formative years took place there for him. He looked after people like Eren and Armin. He risked his life to save Connie. And that's quite a risky move, because I remember that Titan got a nice little bite of his arm, so thankfully it was a small Titan and they took care of it. But yeah, he put himself at risk at that moment in time. But even the concept of that is quite tragic, right? Even though he did get to establish himself as someone totally different, it was because he was acting like someone else. Marcel played a massive part in the next part of his life, the trajectory, right? On Paradis, right? He was this person, right? Dependable person, a role model, someone to look up to, someone reliable, as Galliard, taunted him, pretending to be someone reliable. Yet the tragic part of that is that it was actually him pretending to be someone else, but he struggled so much out there slowly realizing that the island devils are not devils at all, and again this newly established persona, that it became a full-blown disorder, right? That's a thing that Bertolt had to deal with as well, right? I mean, yes, the focus is on Reiner in this episode, but you have to look at it. You have to look at it from Bertolt's perspective as well, man. He had some tough times there too. Again, going back to his breakdown in season 2, episode 11, Charge. It became such a struggle that he ended up going into this dissociative state at times, and Bertolt kind of had to pull him out of it many times, multiple times, right? The Forest of the Giant Trees incident is one that sticks out a lot. Season 2, episode 6 sticks out a lot. His struggles are really depicted in those scenes. And in that scene, you see Ymir and Eren just baffled, right, at this behavior, at this sight. And then, of course, Bertolt kind of has to pull him out of it. And then once he does pull him out of it, you see that just a change in expression, right? And his shoulders slump. And he's like, yeah, that's right. I'm a warrior. That essentially that incredible guilt and shame kind of just pushes him down again, right? That insurmountable guilt, mountain of guilt. There's that disappointment at that moment, right? Once he does come back to it and realizes who he really is. And before I move on from, their time on Paradis, they, all three of them, they were the standouts, right? And, the contrast here, again, the final shot before the opening kicks in of, Reiner and Bertolt training to be child soldiers, and it kind of, switches to that moment in time on Paradis, right, in Shiganshina, as Eren is just chilling, right, and he's hoping for something to happen, and something certainly happened. But again, stark contrast there, right? But yeah, in the training days, the 104th, of course, these three had training, so much experience, years of experience already, so they slotted right in, and they stuck out as the most impressive, again, alongside Mikasa, of course. Now, before I move on, there's quite a interesting moment that happens here, right? You see a young Bertolt, again, it's so tragic that, that's him exiting after kicking in that gate, right, on that day. But the really interesting thing here is the fact that the Smiling Titan emerges, right, and pays him no attention, and even Bertolt is quite surprised by this, right? Even he's kind of baffled by this. Even in this Titan form, Dinah Fritz is so committed to, reuniting with her husband, Grisha Jaeger, that she just ignores this Titan shifter that's right there. It being Dinah Fritz and her going to Grisha's house, it almost felt like inevitable, right? And just like she showed up in that battlefield, right? To Eren Jaeger, because Eren Jaeger is Grisha's son, right? And perhaps she could sense that, right? So she still had a strong connection to Grisha, even after turning into Titan, Dinah Fritz, that is. So again, that is an interesting scene, even Bertolt's quite puzzled by it. Now, speaking of Annie, wow, it was great to see her again, through this flashback and get some more background on her. But it appears that she didn't play a major role in the initial attack on that day, right? Because Reiner choked her out, and the next thing she sees, she's in this room, and of course, you see Eren, Armin, and Mikasa in the background as well. Again, everyone has different struggles, right? Perspective, context. In those candidate days, that scene of showing all these young candidates, young Zeke, Peak, and all of them, the moment she notices that trouble is brewing up, right, she kind of separates herself from that. She kind of zones out, disassociates with it almost, right? The moment she notices that there's a confrontation going on, Galliard and Reiner, again, she doesn't like to take part in these things. She doesn't like to pick sides. She's unbothered by any of that, right? She's not. And it plays out again later on as she's beating. She dishes out a brutal beating to Reiner. Stomps him, kicks him in the face, leaves him a bloody mess. She tells him it's all bullshit, right? And of course, later they come back to that scene. She was kind of just picking at a grasshopper, just crushed it, right? Absolutely smashed it. Bit of a parallel here, her and taking this to the forest of the giant trees. Her really disassembling the original Levi squad, right? Like they're bugs, essentially. And then, of course, in the next episode, there's a shot of her just spinning that one scout member, right? And again, she's having no problems taking them out. And essentially, she was able to do this, right? She was able to focus on this because she tried her best to not make connections, because she knows if she starts making connections, it's going to become difficult for her. So for that reason, she is quite standoffish. And Reiner even kind of brings that up in this episode. Actually tells him to step back. I'm going to barf. She just can't stand him, can she? She calls him an asshole again around that Marco scene in season 3, episode 15, right? The flashback. Yeah, Annie is quite interesting. She really did feel like the most out of place warrior, right? She called it all bullshit, Eldians and Marleyans, sorry. They're all looking out for themselves. They're all liars. It's all bullshit, right? The chosen warrior concept. She sees right through all of it. So like I said, you are a product of your surroundings. So this really makes me interested even more in her background and her upbringing and her father. And of course, she was on these late night escapades as a sleeper agent, trying to gather information on the royal family or the King of the Walls, right? And locating the founding titan and retaking it. But of course, that was all futile because Eren had the founding titan at that moment in time, right? But of course, Annie didn't. There's no way she could have known that, right? And she actually even ran into Kenny the Ripper, didn't she? It was quite nice to see Kenny again. Even for a moment, though unfortunately for her, the excuse she had to come up with after being busted, this is the last thing you want to use against Kenny, right? That I'm your child, your illegitimate child, born in an inn. No. The moment she said that, I was like, no, this is not happening. Like I've said, season 3, episode 10 is, I call that the best episode of the series. At that point, it was made clear in that episode that he is not going to have illegitimate children running around, right, or be reckless about that, right, because of the promise he made to his sister, and he saw just how that turned out for her, right, in Levi. So yeah, that was the last person that anyone should be using that type of story on, right? That type of excuse on, oh, I'm your daughter, right? But she was lucky enough to get out of there, and of course she had to abandon that angle. She couldn't be out there anymore, given that Kenny is out there patrolling, right? So Annie still, there's still that potential of a Annie backstory. She had a lot of suppressed rage, her outburst against Reiner and almost killing him, that I don't know if that was just a normal Annie reaction, right? She was triggered in that moment. So I would love to, at some point get more, backstory on Annie. But yeah, her still being on Paradis, in that crystal shell, that does present an exciting or interesting prospect, doesn't it? And could I even see a bit of a flashback of the things that happened in those 3 years, right? At some point they're going to take me back to some of those things, right, that might have happened. So I'm sure they might have addressed that issue, that there is another warrior that is still here and in their shell, right, in the crystal shell. So it'll be really interesting to see how she progresses after that, and how she even makes it out of there, and who she meets after getting out of it, right? Now, before I move on from this, it wasn't the best plan, was it? This mission, to retake the founding titan and sending in these children on such an important mission. Yes, they're not just normal children in comparison to the Eldian children inside Paradis, but still, right? Even the commander questioned that, right? That tactic or that plan of action to send children on a mission so important, such as taking back the founding titan. And again, I brought up the concept of Zeke not being sent. Perhaps they consider him a bit too important, right? As the oldest of the group. perhaps. Um, and yeah, Peak stayed behind as well. And of course, then Galliard had to stay behind because he wasn't picked. But yeah, this, I feel like this mission was doomed to fail from the beginning, right? There was so much there was so much that was against them right from the beginning, and even the notion of, infiltrating and then locating, then retaking and then escaping with the founding Titan. It's a tall order, for children. And this shows just how easily things can just, fall apart. They fell apart before they even started the mission, right? And it appears that the mission itself wasn't even the mission that they initially had. This is something Reiner decided after Marcel ended up dying, right? And the leaders lost. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is that phenomenal scene, right? The sleeper cell dossier, the warrior unit, the new unit. The presentation was so, it was just so exciting, right? It was so cinematic and enthralling. I just loved it. Of course, it's quite devastating. It's sad as well that those are children that are taking out a nation essentially on a test mission, right? But you can't deny that it did have this really cool feeling, didn't it? I love that. Again, like I said, it had this cinematic feeling about it, right? Like a cinematic tone. I loved how they're going through their dossier individually, right? And then they're showing or they're pairing that up with them in action, right? I just love that presentation so much. It's one of my favorite scenes of the series for sure. The thing to note here is Peak, right? They said the Card Titan is good for long missions because of the endurance, right? So in that sense, it makes much more sense that I didn't see Peak in human form in Shiganshina, right? In season 3, part 2. She remained in that Card Titan form for long periods of time. And again, like I mentioned in one of the episodes in season 3, part 2, the Scout Titan at that time, I used to call it Scout Titan, is the MVP. And again, the things they're describing here, it's in line with how she behaved or acted, right? And she was single-handedly responsible for saving Zeke and Reiner, right? And bringing them back to Marley. And then, of course, there's the Colossal Titan, the God of Destruction. Oh my God. There's those two shots of him. One of them is just kind of like looking up at him. He's so far up in the smoke that you can't even see his features anymore, right? But you see his legs. Phenomenal shot. And then the other one is from a distance as the commander and some of these other Marley officials are, looking in on this test mission. And you see this ominous looming figure in the background. Beautiful shots, right? And like I said, Armin is the new God of Destruction, the greatest power of all, according to Reiner. And there's a shot of young Bertold, it's so nonchalant. It's like he pricked his finger, right, and the blood's leaking, and then the transformation happens, and it is like a nuclear bomb going off, right? And to end it off, I kind of wanted to go back to a couple of scenes I missed in the discussion for episode 2. First of all, the commander. This is such an interesting character. This is, there's that one shot of him observing all these Eldian soldiers returning to their families, and reuniting, and the shot really lingers on him for a bit, right? It's clear to see that as their commander, he does feel some sense of responsibility for them. Yes, he considers them Eldian devils, and he's on board with all of that, but you can see that he has a tolerance for them, that he is open to, collaborating, that he is open to listening to their ideas. He let them celebrate on that midnight train, right? Let them have it just this once, he said. So yeah, he and again in this episode, in episode 3, even he's not, down, or he's kind of questioning the idea of sending these child soldiers in, right? And in that sense, he's known them since they were children, right? And he still knows them. So, regardless of the Eldian Marley divide here, he is their commander, and I feel like over time he has established a sense of responsibility for them, and that yes, they might be Eldians, but they are under my command. They are my responsibility, and he sees them, right? Again, I think that shot is so poignant of him observing these Eldians return home. And in that sense, how heartbreaking was that moment? You see the gates open, and then the family on one side and the returning soldiers on the other. And the heartbreaking thing is many of them didn't even return. So some of those families are going to be standing there until they figure out that their child, their son, or daughter is not going to return, or hasn't, or has died, right? That really was a beautiful scene. It brought me to tears, seeing even Zeke and his grandparents, and Eren's grandparents and Grisha's parents. That reunion, that was, wow. It really was quite, it was just really sad to see and quite happy to see, right? It was like a happy kind of sadness almost to see them reuniting like that. But yeah, the commander, one of the most interesting characters of the new season so far, that's for sure. And I'm looking forward to how his character arc plays out. And another scene that really stood out at the time, and I forgot to bring up, is of them in that Mideast area before getting on the train to Liberia, right? As Reiner goes out to them, and Gabby's all excited to see him. It appears that there might have been a brothel in that area, right? Or some sort of gentleman's club, right? And I think Udo said the commander himself he's there too. So, the crazy thing here is that these children who are trained from an early age to become weapons of mass destruction, right, to kill hundreds, right, and just become these dark gods almost, these figures, these godlike figures, right? That's okay, but gotta draw the line at a brothel. Children cannot be in that kind of place if it is a brothel, or it might not be something that extreme, but it is that kind of establishment clearly. I just found that so bizarre, right? I mean, yeah, they are children, and you don't want them going into a place like that, but then there are also children that are training to become these gods almost, right? These feared monsters almost, and that they are going to be required to eat the person, right, at some point in a pretty much barbaric ritual, right, to take over one of these 9, if they do end up becoming the next Armored. And then another contrast here is, the horrors of war being depicted on that return, and this shows the soldiers experiencing PTSD, right, and mental trauma, right, and then of course that one asshole, right, triggers them again by making that boom noise, right, and then of course at one point it transitions to the dinner table, right? Gabby, she also said boom, right? She made that noise, right? So at that point it switches to the glory of war, right? The heroics, the heroic antics of being in a war. And it was so strange to see this family celebrate this young child and her antics, right? Right after the showing us the horrors of war. They're like happy for her, right? They're happy that someone they know is doing this out there. Imagine being Reiner at that dinner table listening into all of this. Whoop. He must have been like just screaming inside, just dying inside, right? It must have been so difficult for him to take that, they're celebrating Gabby's antics, right? And they're proud that she is like essentially the front runner to take on the Armored Titan, and at some point she is going to have to consume her older cousin Reiner to become the Armored Titan if it does play out like that. It's just so crazy, right? How they have so many of these Eldians believing that this is such an honor, right? Yet it is this dark future that they take on after becoming one of these 9. Yeah. But yeah, those are the things I kind of wanted to talk about, and I kind of forgot in episode 2. So I think that's about it for that one. If you enjoyed it, consider dropping a like. That really does help the channel grow, and it helps it get noticed. It's going to help this episode get noticed. Yeah, it gets more eyes on it in search results. So if you enjoyed it, really do consider dropping a like. It takes a split second. Consider dropping some comments. Give me your thoughts. If you're new here, I would love to hear from you as well. But please remember that it is quite strict in terms of hinting and spoilers and all of that. Even profile pics. I know some people are probably rolling their eyes. They're like, oh, okay, come on. But this is the final season of an amazing story, and I just really don't want to be spoiled on anything. And So there are some strict guidelines in place, but you're still able to comment as long as it's not a spoiler or hinting at something. If you are interested in full length for this episode, and perhaps even early access to the next episode right now, consider checking out the Patreon page. It's entirely optional. Regardless of that, Shingeki is always going up on Fridays for everyone, but that is an option for anyone who might be interested in more, perhaps in some of the perks. Also, the pinned comment. Please consider checking out the pinned comment from time to time, especially because if there is an update, I'll usually post it in the pinned comment right at the top of the comment section. You can't miss it. It also has links to the social media and the Patreon page itself. So consider checking that out. But yeah, I think that's about it for this incredible episode. And of course, quite a cliffhanger to leave it on Eren Yeager, confirming, giving us, the audience, definitive confirmation that this is Eren Yeager and he is sat on a bench in Liberio. That is just mental. That is insane. And they've already set up that something big is on the horizon. Zeke talking about this festival that's going to take place in Liberio, and all these important people are going to come. And oh my God, there's just things are getting quite insane. So that's about it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed the episode, and I certainly enjoyed talking about it. So I hope to see you again soon. Take it easy.